open it up. If you're not talking about now, start.
Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man podcast. Today, we have a fun episode talking about sex. We've got Chris McCluskey, Jamie Slingerland, Michael McGreevy, and Chris Niemeyer in the house. Even if you aren't talking about sex, you are. And what does that look like for you personally, for your family, as a dad, as a husband? Guys, I'm excited to talk about this. I'm also, you can probably sense my sweaty palms. So,
yeah, baby.
What do you think? How are we going to dive into this topic?
This is McCluskey, and I'll jump right in just acknowledging, yeah, it's a fun topic, and it's a scary topic, and it's a monstrously big topic. It's a terribly important topic, maybe the most important topic we could tackle. So it's a whole lot of things mixed in. We'd do it a great disservice if we only made it fun. But there is to be an element of that, and because it's such a delicate, intimate, private topic, it also has a built-in sense of awkwardness about it. And yeah, it does kind of make our palms sweaty. And that isn't just because we're necessarily turned on. It's because we're nervous and a little freaked out. All of that and more besides is supposed to be, I would suggest, supposed to be in the mix of having an honest conversation about something as central to our being as our sexuality. If you're going, whoa, wait a minute, let me turn the volume up here. That's good. But yeah, it's probably going to make you a little bit uncomfortable. If you were listening without the earbuds in and the kids are in the car, you might want to put the earbuds in now.
Yeah, I'm turning up the volume right here for me. I want to learn.
That's right. And man, we all have different starting points here. We all have different situations with our fathers. Some of us didn't have a father around. Some of us had a very involved father. But most of us did not have an open conversation around what this whole sexuality thing should look like or could look like, or what's a healthy way to have a conversation around this. So I'm excited to talk about this because I have a lot to learn here. Having 3 little kids, man, there's lots of conversations to come. So, man, let's get into this.
Yeah, I'm excited. Between the 4 of us, how many children do we have? Who's good at math here?
It's like a Greyhound bus full, I think.
Something like that. Yeah, we got 7. You guys got 4. That's 11. And then we got
18. I think we got 18. 7 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And this has been a point on the podcast, right? That our kids are watching what we do. They're watching us date our wives and the conversations that we're having. We're trying to leave the doors open on a lot of different conversations we're having, just living life openly in front of our kids. And I love this idea that you can't not talk about sex, because when McCluskey, I've heard you say this before, and I was like, well, my parents didn't talk a lot about sex, and that's probably the answer that a lot of people have. So could you maybe dive into a little bit of this concept of you're always talking about sex, even if you don't think you are?
Yeah, because that's a really important concept to grasp. I touched on it a couple episodes ago when we were talking about money, and I just used it as an example, like that I used to tell parents, you can't not talk to your kids about sex. The question is, what messages are you sending? But whether you're using your mouth to speak or you're just speaking through your life and through your awkwardness and your uncomfortable, speaking through your silence even, right? Speaking through your interactions with your spouse or speaking through your interactions with the kids. All of those things communicate messages. So the question we really have to ask as dads and as husbands, as men in this culture, is what messages are we sending, and are those the messages I want to be sending? So it came up there, and I think it's a drumbeat that we'll probably have throughout. Well, I hope we do a series of these talks over time with this EFM broadcast that we periodically circle back to so many different aspects where our sexuality intersects with the rest of life. But to put it in the biggest, broadest brush strokes initially, I think we know that in the Genesis account, when God created male and female, it says, male and female created he them. And so we are each created in the image of God. It's not like man images God more than woman does, or certainly not that woman images God more than man does. We talk about God in the male gender terminology only because that's the way he's referenced in Scripture, but we know he's not literally male. He is imaged in this physical plane through both masculinity and femininity, and those are some distinct things, but we're all image bearers. We all carry images of God, experiences of what God is like, his nature, in our maleness and our femaleness. So in that biggest possible sense, that's part of what's at the base of why I say you cannot not be conveying messages about gender, about sexuality, because it's in the very fiber of our being. How we image God is in those gender identities.
Wow, we are getting into it now. I mean, my mind is going to the conversations that me and my friends had back when we were in middle school, and it was, did you get the sex talk or not? That was it. Well, have you had the sex talk yet? Now you're saying, Chris, that this sex talk is happening throughout our entire lives as parents in the way that we act and live and do life. Man, that's a whole new perspective.
and you nailed it right there. Yeah, it's going on all the time, but it's a conversation, if you will, in quotation marks, through interaction, through being involved in each other's lives all day long, and oftentimes it's not actually being put into words. And boy, that's the real detriment.
What I'm picking up here, and this is like something I'm going to apply. Just this is really, it's a mindset. This is not a one conversation like probably so many of us had, or unfortunately had awkwardly or didn't have with a parent. So this is a mindset issue when it comes to sexuality, not just a one and done conversation, not something that you have one time with your dad or your parents and then it's never again and you just have to kind of pick things up. I mean, that's something I'm already walking away with here, because as I raise, 2 boys, 2 girls, all of them under 9, not yet having a conversation, if you will, but understanding we need to start addressing femininity, masculinity, that identity we have in with our Lord, like you said, Chris. So, I mean, let's talk more about that. How do we address this big topic in our homes, and a mindset shift we need to have as a couple and as a family?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we're starting in this place, and I know that we will leave today's conversation feeling like, man, all I did was scratch the surface, but that's okay, because it is foundational, and you nailed it right there. It's a mindset that I don't think most of us picked up at any point earlier in life normally, and yet when we don't have a mindset, we're not able to see certain, like not having good lenses to see with. You can't see clearly anything if you're operating on some kind of a faulty set of lenses or a faulty mindset. So, yeah, carrying it, like, what do you do with regard to this? I think it'd be good to start with developmental stages of kids, because when kids are infants and toddlers, the first messages that we give have to do with their gender. I mean, like, what do you look for on the sonogram, right? It's a boy, it's a girl. We're identifying their sexuality immediately. And that's a little uncomfortable when they're pointing the little arrow on the, there's the little penis. Yep, it's a boy. We all get a little uncomfortable with that, but it's everything that we look for. And we start picking out things, clothing and colors, and how are we going to do the nursery and all. What's all that based on? It's based on preconceived notions, at least, that we have about gender and gender identity and what we want to instill in the kids. And some people seek to wipe out all of that. They don't want to go with blue or pink. They want to go with yellow or everything white or whatever. But we're all thinking about issues of sexuality from the get-go, long before we would ever think about having the talk or something. And yet we don't have that mindset, that conscious awareness that is in fact what's going on. Sexuality is directing a lot of decisions that we make, actions that we engage in interaction with our children. So it's good to kind of step back and realize, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of have been sending covert messages, at least, from the very beginning. You bet you have. You bet you have, even in the way that you roughhouse with the kids. Typically, we dads wrestle a little bit differently with our boys than we do with our girls. Typically, our interactions and the bedtime routine and brushing out hair and the kind of joking and teasing that we'll do with our boys is a little different than our girls. And our wives the same way. These are manifestations of an awareness that we have unconsciously or semi-consciously about sexuality, and we're acting on it, but we're not consciously thinking that through. That's all an episode like this, I think, wants to seek to do. Really, is we want to elevate our semi-conscious to our fully conscious and go, whoa, yeah, I have been having conversations about sexuality, a lot of planes. I'm just not thinking consciously enough about it. And if I want to be proactive in shaping, I better get conscious about it.
Chris, I'm sorry to bring this up, but it reminds me of a rule that I've had to instill with Gunner: no kicking in the beans. So he'll actually hang onto my neck and just like kick his legs, and unfortunately his feet line right up with something that really hurts when it gets
you bet.
So I've had to that almost, with what you're saying, that almost is a conversation about sexuality in a way where that goes. Like, well, why not? Why don't you kick a man there? Well, here's why.
It hurts.
So it's opened up already. And man, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm realizing that I am having a lot of these conversations with Gunner at 3.5.
I'm realizing already at diaper changes. Don't touch that. Little things when they're young. I mean, obviously, you don't want them touching their junk, but what messages are you sending? Poop. Sorry, guys. Come on, I can say that on an episode.
Yeah, which junk are we talking about here, Chris?
Chris and Mike joke around. They make fun of me because I say coronating ourselves, to acknowledge the fact that we are talking to our kids about sex, that they're seeing the roles that we have in the relationship with our spouses. As you explain that, I just had a smile on my face. I can do this because I can lean in a little bit more if I take those. You said it's happening subconsciously, and now we're having awareness that we're actually doing it. And if we don't have awareness, then we can't tweak and adjust and acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is why we are doing it, and maybe we should do less of this thing and more of this other thing. I'm almost feeling hope that we've been doing some things right.
Well, that's awesome. And I hope some of the listeners are feeling the same way, because it should present us with a feeling of hopefulness about what can be, and recognizing, okay, even if I've been doing some things semi-consciously, at least some of them were really good. Others, maybe not so good. So I'm glad now that I'm recognizing that. But I'm going to riff off, Mike, of what you just said about, the rule that no kicking in the beans. Yes, that is a sex-specific kind of a statement there. And it can open up a door for the ongoing overt, like purposeful conversations that we'll have with our kids throughout all of their growing up, so that we don't default to this, at what age do I have the talk with them? Oh man, you've been having the talk literally, overtly, not just covertly, throughout their whole life. You got a 3-year-old and it's like, no kicking in the beans. Why not? Well, because that really hurts. You could take that same conversation and explain it further. Whoa, because dude, that's where daddy keeps the little seeds that made you, and that have to get inside of mommy to make other babies. That's the most delicate, important part of a man. So you want to protect that in yourself, and you want to protect that in me, and not risk hurting that.
But Chris, I can see somebody saying, are you kidding me? You're going to tell a 3-year-old about that part of sexuality? I mean, you're going to ruin their lives. Like, what do you say to that response?
Well, again, I would say there you're giving them a purposeful, conscious message that's setting the stage for, that's probably all they're going to want to know. They're going to be like, really? Okay, wow, I didn't know that. And the conversation probably won't go any further than that. Even if it does, it can stay at a very metaphorical, birds and bees, seed in the ground kind of a conversation. You're not going to have a sex talk literally with your 3-year-old in explaining that further. But to go with what Chris Niemeyer was saying just a minute ago about like changing their diapers and, don't touch that. Well, wait a minute. Now there's an overt message that we're giving. We don't want them to touch their poop. No, but they will touch their genitalia during diaper changing because they can't any other time. And why would they want to? Because they're learning. about everything in their environment. Shoot, man, they put everything in their mouth as much as they can. I can't do that, thankfully, with their genitalia. But you get the idea. They're constantly exploring their environment and learning everything. And they're like, what this? What that? Why? What this do? So that's all they're really signaling by touching an area that they don't normally have access to, because we keep it taped away or pinned away with their diaper. They explore it. Whoa, there's sensations. There's a lot of nerve endings there. And again, we as a parent, instead of only sending a message of no, don't touch, you can talk about that's your private part. That's your very special part. That's the part that we cover with your bathing suit when you're an older kid. Again, whatever's appropriate, depending on if it's a 6-month-old or an 18-month-old who's not yet, I guess they might be in their pull-ups yet. They're not fully potty trained or something. Your conversation will be different. But again, you want to choose conscious messages so you can give them information, and any aspect having to do with sexuality and gender is not only okay to talk about in this family, we do. It just is. That's just the way we roll here. And boy, does that make it a whole lot more comfortable when it's time to have those more important talks as they get later on in the childhood years, knocking on puberty and adolescence. You've set the stage.
I love that. Yeah, you've set the stage for the fact there's nothing taboo in this family to talk about. You want them to come to you. And that what you just said there is also just freeing. The fact that I think personally I probably come from, and I think a lot of guys come from, this mentality that there's got to be a holy grail book that we need to go through with our preteen or adolescent, or there's got to be you got to get that conversation, the sex talk right the first time, because if you don't, you're going to screw it up. Like you're kind of busting that myth.
Big what I'm time, hearing. Yeah,
that it's not a one and done thing. This is an ongoing conversation, and I'm learning how to do some of that even at the toddler years. So, freeing.
Yeah. Man, I'm hearing that, like, this, just the fact that this conversation is open for me is a huge win, because I think when there's silence, it kind of goes toward the negative. It goes toward this shame thing, or maybe there's just a couple interventions where they say, your parents say, don't do that, or just, that's bad. Like, stay away from that. And then that everything around that gets thrown into this category of bad and shame. And it's going to happen in some way or another. So every time there's an interaction with that world, it's all shameful and it's all bad. And then, just the fact that this conversation is open, I think, is huge for me, for a lot of people to hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah. McCluskey, I'm wondering if there's dads listening that haven't done that with their 3-year-old, kicking them in the nuts and explaining that the seed is in there. Now they got a 10-year-old and they're, well, how can I make up for lost ground to make it so it's not as awkward? I can lean into this and, maybe not have like big talks, but like add little things. If we don't know how to do that because we didn't start when the kid was 3, like what are some steps that we could take?
That's a really great question, and an answer to the question is questions. One of the greatest ways to engage our kids is to ask them questions. I think as parents, and probably maybe especially as men, we tend more frequently to want to tell, to give advice, guidance, wisdom, teaching, and that's great. But questions invite instead the child to let us know more what they're wondering about, what they're struggling with, what they're exploring, what they're actually curious about. And you can even follow up those questions with other questions. So you pose a general question like, dude, who are some of the guys that you really look up to? And they might start telling you about a cartoon character, or they might start telling you about, I don't know, a superhero or whatever else. Stay with questions in that and ask them why. What is it you like about that? Why does that seem so cool to you? Oh, wow. Do you know any guys who are like that? Huh. What are other qualities of like manhood that you seem to really think are cool or you respect? So you engage in, this can be windshield time, right? This is when the little guy is with you, sitting in the back seat because he's not big enough yet to be in the front seat, or maybe he is riding shotgun with you now, or just whatever you might be doing, that you have those conversations, that you open up through questions rather than stammering and stumbling and trying to impart some brilliant piece of wisdom and not sound like you're as awkward as you're feeling at the moment, in the context of a questions-based conversation with your kid will sometimes drop a real bomb. And that's pay dirt. Once they, maybe they didn't even realize they were saying it, but once it's out there, then they look at you suddenly with eyes, big and wide, like, oh my gosh, was it okay that I said that? That's where we get the cool opportunity to first model not freaking out, not shaming, not looking away or looking in anger or anything other than just continuing to be fully focused on them and affirming with a smile and keeping conversation going, because their questioning is the same kind of questioning they're doing about everything else in the world and about themselves and about other people and all. It's just, how else do we learn, right? Mm-hmm. We want them to come to us in that kind of a space, and we chase them from it when we instead either just give them advice or give them silence or give them those messages and say, oh no, we don't talk about that. Well, what do we think then? They're like not going to explore it? Of course they are. They're just going to do it behind a closed door next time, right? Or they'll go to the wisdom of the locker room or to their buddies or a magazine or the internet or, God forbid all the places they might go with it. Of course they're curious. And of course we want to step into that curiosity space with them. So don't assume you know what they're questioning. Ask them. What are they thinking about? What are they questioning? What are they interested in talking about? And meet them there.
Yeah, and that takes a complete different approach to going to them with some kind of piece of knowledge that you're going to sit down and kind of explain it, and it's super awkward for them because they just have to sit there and feel awkward and not say anything. You're building the trust and rapport with little things because it's safe. They can answer it however they want or give as little or as much detail. That's a great answer to the question that I had.
Man, the childhood years are so forgiving too. We as dads can have a pretty steep learning curve and we can make a lot of mistakes. I'm not talking about abuse things or neglect, but I'm talking like, not really having fully stepped into our role as a man and as a shaper of our children. Children are very forgiving. They want our time. They want our attention. They want our love. And we've got it to give to them. And so anytime that we get a new wake-up call from a talk like this or a great sermon or a book we read or anything else that prompts us to go, whoa, time to step it up again. Kids are usually really resilient, and they'll just meet us at that new plane that we're inviting them to as we mature into our role as a dad.
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of glossed over a really important point. Or we didn't gloss over it, but we didn't spend much time on it. This trust and this conversation doesn't happen. This bomb doesn't get dropped unless you're riding in the car with your son, unless you're taking a walk with your daughter through the woods, spending time with her. So that's, I think, is a huge part of that. Like, you can't just stop your busyness, initiate this conversation, then go back to your busyness. This comes out of a relationship, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, and Michael, when I took Diego to Cuba a couple months ago, I remember you and Chris were really encouraging me to make the most out of that time just with him. And there was we spent a lot of time walking together and building that trust. And McCluskey, when you're talking about windshield time and like asking your kid, what's this quality and like who do you see it in? When there's a relationship where you're spending individual time one-on-one with your children,
yeah, we do have to be in those intentional spaces with the kids because we're doing life with them. They're not constantly coming trying to get our attention because the door is closed or because we're off at work and never available or daddy needs private time or something. No, I mean, we're doing life with them. Right before we went to this recording, I was having a conversation around sexuality with my 16-year-old daughter. We were making lunch in the kitchen, and a friend of hers that she had just seen recently had gotten her hair buzzed. And I mean, we're talking like military sergeant kind of a buzz, flat top, the whole kind of a thing. And so without judgment, but engaging in conversation about what's going on with that girl and, those ultra short haircuts or a girl shaving her hair bald and all that kind of stuff was what we engaged in. And that's a conversation about an aspect of sexuality, femininity, beauty in the world. And yet you could go, way overboard with it and get all preachy and try to come down rigidly on legalistic notions from scriptures. I mean, we didn't go there at all. It was an engaging conversation about the fluidity of the boundaries around femininity and beauty and sexuality and all. And I just love that it came up while we're making sandwiches.
I love that. I love that you can just do that around a island in the kitchen. But that's, exactly to both of your points there. And we're really kind of demystifying that quality over quantity time. I think a lot of times guys will hear that preached to them that, if you just spend this good quality time, then it doesn't matter if you're working 70 hours a week, No, it's both. We have to have the quantity of time, the walks through the woods, the making the bologna sandwich, the windshield time, because life happens in all those moments. And that's where the kids and you build their trust. Michael,
making lunch in the kitchen with my daughter in my kitchen. Making
lunch. That conversation never would have happened with Sarah if you weren't there.
Yep. And, I'm just reflecting back on my last daddy date. On Mondays, I go out with each of the kids, get to rotate through who's going with me as I go to one of my medical appointments. They wait for me for that. And when I'm done with the weekly medical appointment, then we go out to whatever restaurant they want to go to. So this one was with my 14-year-old, my son, Braden, and we jumped in the car, and we were not even probably 2 miles from the house, just talking general, hey, what have you done today and stuff. And he just goes, okay, so I got a question about sex. And I'm like, that is so awesome. Cool. That he's letting me know, Dad, I know it's okay for me to raise a question like this with you. And I know that it's not the kind of conversation I'm going to have around the dinner table with everybody, but I also know I haven't got to come to you sheepishly, hesitantly, hoping I can maybe kind of sort of dance around it and you might give me something valuable. It's like, it's not just okay. I know you want it because it's important. And so here we go. I got you to myself now. I got a question about sex. And we just dove right into a real open conversation in that time. That's fruit of years of being there and this just kind of conscious awareness of how much our sexuality impacts every area of our lives.
Chris, I want to say this, McCluskey, that being in that mastermind group with you, hearing stories like this, this is why us guys need each other, especially, you're a couple years down the road from me and Mike and Chris. So I see myself having those same conversations with my older kids because I'm kind of having that mental rehearsal. I want to build that trust and rapport that Diego will just be coming to me. Yeah. This is the power of being in a community of guys who are real with each other. Just say, we're going to do these things that maybe are a little bit difficult or tough. But I just feel like I'm empowered hearing you give that example. So appreciate it.
That's a really good note here in wrapping up because you used the word mindset. You said, I'm like getting in this mindset of the way that I want, or no, you said use mental rehearsal. I'm doing this like mental rehearsal. I can see myself doing it. Cool. Because that is mindset. And that was one of the words that we pulled out of the box right at the beginning of this episode today, that we will see things when we have a particular mindset. We'll see opportunities. We'll see the need. We'll see the ways in which we're sending messages when we examine our mindsets and when we adjust them, like a conversation like this does. All kinds of new possibilities open up because you're doing a different mental rehearsal. You're in a different mindset.
Yeah, and I'm learning here. Like I'm seeing Gunnar kick Michael in the nuts, and then him being proactive and having that rapport and trust with Gunnar and having it not be awkward at 3 years old. And that's what happened with Colin at 15. You've had those deposits of trust in those little conversations. And so that conversation wasn't this big, like Colin's not going to talk 30 years from now saying like, my dad had the talk that one time when I went to him and asked the question about sex. And
that was Braden, not Colin, but it doesn't matter.
Sorry.
Colin's
Colin and Braden.
Now. Braden's the 14-year-old. But yeah,
well, you got so many kids. I screwed it up. I get them mixed up sometimes.
Me too.
Yeah, but the vast difference between the message that you got to share with him, Chris, versus what he would have picked up along the way if there wasn't anything said or if you didn't have that rapport. My gosh, you're talking about two completely different understandings of what sexuality is. And that, like, this is so powerful and so foundational and causes such a ripple in the positive direction when we can make this connection with our kids. I'm just thinking about every ripple that comes out of your son now because of this conversation, this openness that you have, versus the years and years of recovery and repair that are needed because of the wrong message. I mean, this stuff is huge.
Because he would have taken that same question. He still got the question. He would have taken it to the wisdom of the locker room, right? Those bozos, or like I said, the internet, or wherever else. It's not like our kids aren't asking the questions and facing the struggles and hearing the conversations and the messages in media every day. They are. Where do they go to get any other kind of a clarity of vision about these things? Boy, God help them if they don't come to us. And we're the ones that pave that road.
So we definitely just scratched the surface of a super important topic and really kind of teased out, I think, some future episodes I'm already envisioning here about some important topics around this. But, and just looking at the conversations we've had here, the takeaways that personally I've received, this idea that we can't not talk about this important topic, and we already are in the context of how we're living daily life in front of them. I mean, what are some takeaways being proactive as a husband, as a father, to talk about this with our wives, with our kids? Just asking and discussing with your spouse, how did your parents talk to you about sex? Mm-hmm. What do you wish you would have known earlier? How to make it not awkward between you two, between your kids in the household. Yeah, Michael, how would you and Lydia discuss this topic as you are parents of young kids wanting to grow them and grow your family around this topic so it's easy to address?
Easy? I'm not expecting it to be easy at all.
They're not easy, okay.
Yeah, but we have talked about this, our own stories and our own experiences with this discussion with our parents. We really want to get on the same page with how we're going to have these discussions with our kids. And I actually really feel compelled to continue that conversation. It's been a little bit, and I want to open that up and just talk openly about that. What could this look like for our kids? We know what we didn't like about our experience and what that ultimately led to and how that caused some of the challenges that we've had in our own lives. And so, this conversation needs more attention and needs more discovery for sure.
Start this conversation with your wife. Maybe it's for the first time. Maybe you need to pick it back up. How do you as a couple, as a family, want to address sexuality, even from a young age? Because you're talking about it whether you know it or not. So start taking some proactive steps, being intentional with your wife and then with your kids to raise up your family in a way that you want to see them succeed in all areas, especially this important topic of sex.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.